Today we sit down with a Touhou player named Hourai to hear her perspective on the series, its lore, and the community that plays, or in some cases that doesn't play, these games. So grab a cup of tea and watch out for yokai. It's time for a one-credit chat. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, thanks. I just finished dinner and I came off a call with some other Touhou players before.
Oh, that's interesting to me. So do you have a community of people that you talk to regularly who are super into Touhou?
There is a Discord server for a live stream called the Touhou Replay Showcase, which shows off user-submitted replays on a live stream, generally for the Western community, but anyone can submit. It was inspired by a Japanese player who did a similar sort of stream. And nowadays, their Discord server is one of the main hubs for the Western community, at least as far as the players go. And sometimes I can hop into voice calls there and talk to some of the other players.
That sounds really cool. Do you ever submit your own replays?
Yes, I have. Submitted a few of them over the years. I got back into it pretty recently, and I think I've submitted one every month this year so far.
Oh, good for you. Okay, sorry, before I get too in the weeds here, let's go back a little bit. So for starters, can you tell me a little bit about your username, like how to pronounce it?
Well, Hourai is a Japanese word.
Okay.
It's based on some legendary island in Chinese and Japanese mythology that's referenced a few times in Touhou. And the latter half is just a Romanian phrase that's associated with one particular Touhou character, but I don't really use that anymore. I just go by Hourai.
I did a quick Google before our interview. So yeah, I saw that in Touhou lore, correct me when I get something wrong, because I will, but it's the name of a doll that's controlled by a character named Alice. And then it also mentioned that it was a mountain, like you said. And I guess the mountain, is that from real life mythology that was borrowed by Touhou, or is it totally like a Touhou creation?
That is real life mythology.
Oh, okay.
Of course, over the years, people have tried to associate some real life places to that mountain and island, but it is legendary, I believe.
So what made you choose that name?
Well, okay, so this is a funny story.
Oh, go for
but
it.
if you look at Touhou lore outside of the shmups, Zun, creator of Touhou, he also writes these music albums. Some of them have original music mixed in with some slightly remixed Touhou soundtracks. And they have some lore that includes one character who's never appeared in the games, who is associated somehow with the real-life writer Lefcadio Hearn. And Lefcadio Hearn was a writer who was really fascinated with Japanese mythology and folklore. And one of his famous books, Kaidan, wrote about the legend of Hourai and the Japanese take on it. And I was really inspired by that entry in particular, and that's why I wanted to take that name.
That's a great little microcosm of one of the things that I'd like to talk to you about today, which is that, I've made a couple of videos about Touhou, and I've played some of the Touhou games just on a very basic level, but there's a whole other world of Touhou and Touhou fans and Touhou lore that I know absolutely nothing about. And I think probably that some other people listening who are, into shmups and they know about Touhou from, like, they know them as video games, but maybe they don't know them as the cultural entity that they are. That's one thing that I hope that maybe you can clue us in on a little bit is, what is this bigger world of Touhou that goes beyond these bullet hell games that people like?
It's really interesting because I imagine a good number of people who would be watching your channel in particular are going to be familiar with the Touhou games as games.
Right.
But funny enough, the Touhou community is extremely fragmented. It's so much so that it's probably hard to understand from an outsider's perspective. But the kinds of people who find the games appealing are very often not the same kinds of people who are very deep into the lore or characters or things like that. Although, if you ask most Touhou players, they can probably tell you what their favorite character and favorite OST would be. There are a lot of different sides to the Touhou community, and one of them that I've talked to a lot is people who are interested in lore, but those people are also interested in fan works that play with lore sometimes, like fan fiction or doujin manga. On the other hand, there's a lot of people who just fairly passively enjoy Toho characters, I think, and enjoy seeing fan art of them. I think that when Toho was a little newer, especially, I don't know how true this is now, it used to give other shmup players the vibe that a lot of people who were into Toho as a series, even for the gameplay, might be interested in the aesthetic of Toho a lot more than just the gameplay. Of course, Toho's aesthetic, where you control humanoid characters and fight bosses who are also humanoid, tends to look very different from the average shmup where you're going to be controlling some sort of airship or spaceship and fighting against larger ones, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I think that at least that used to give some people the impression that Toho just wasn't appealing to the same crowd as the fans of the average arcade shmup. Although to some extent that actually is true, but I think there are gameplay reasons that differentiate Toho from the standard arcade shmup as well.
The very first game, actually, that I 1cc'd was Death Smiles, which in a weird way is actually aesthetically a lot closer to Toho than it is to something like a Dodon Pachi, you know, where it's you're controlling, you know, a magical girl who's going through. It's a horizontal shmup. It is very different in a lot of ways, too. But are games like that are maybe more, they have more of an anime aesthetic, they're less like mech and plane focused, are those more popular with Toho people? Or would you say that, you know, people who like Toho, they really like Toho and it's less often that they'll venture off into other shmups?
Gosh, it's a little hard for me to say. I'd actually, if anything, when I see people playing shmup that was not made by Zune, not a mainline Toho game, it's probably either a Toho fan game or usually I see something by Cave, if anything, which I believe Death Smiles is, right? But
yeah, it's a Cave.
But it'll be games like Dodonpachi or Ketsui, for example, that where you are controlling spaceships or something of a similar aesthetic anyway. I think people like them because they're popular shmups, and I think that all bullet hells do have some common elements that will appeal to Toho fans too. I think if anything, what Toho fans really like, though, is I guess I'd call it the feeling that for the most part, Toho games are designed with some sort of dodging in mind, or at least that goes for people who are fans of survival style Toho, which I can talk about in a bit. I guess scoring would have some of its own appeal, since that is often about milking things, for example.
Let's go back a little bit again. Can you tell me about how you first got into Toho? Did you start with the games, or did you start with something from the community?
I think I saw some 3D animation, I think it was MMD, that featured a Toho character, and I was curious about that character, so I looked her up. And I didn't know what Toho was at the time, but I think I found out that some of the media I had seen in the past was related to Toho, and I had no idea. Like the famous song "Bad Apple," for instance.
That one really surprised me when I was making that video, where I was like, "Oh yeah, wait, I've seen this before. I know what this is," and I had no idea that it was a Toho reference or that it was from Toho.
Oh yeah, I just thought it was a Vocaloid song or something because, funny enough, that's where I saw it. I didn't even know what Toho was, and when I found out that a lot of these things I'd seen before were related to Toho, that made me even more interested. And I think I asked a friend who was familiar with Toho in passing, and he introduced me to the games. So my first major engagement with Toho actually was playing the sixth game, Embodiment of Scarlet Devil. Really, I'd say the idea that the games were difficult was what held my interest, although I didn't realize it was part of the much greater genre of shmups at the time.
Tell me about that time when you first started playing that game. Did you play it until you cleared it? Did you try it and think, okay, this is really hard? Like, did you know about the concept of a 1cc? Like, where were you at that point?
So I was aware of the concept of a 1cc, but my skill level was so far removed from that, especially since I started playing on normal difficulty instead of just easy difficulty.
Mhm.
My skill level was left a lot to be desired since that was my first shmup essentially.
Oh yeah,
And
right.
really what I wanted to do was just get to the end of the game using as many continues as I could. And it took me a while to even do that because on my first try I just lost to the stage 4 boss, I believe. But my ultimate goal was always going to be to 1cc. I started by just trying to get to the end of the game just to see what it looked like. I know that a lot of shmup fans like to just put in a single credit at a time and stop if that credit doesn't get them to the end, which I think is probably a really fun play style. But at the time, it was more important to me to just hopefully see what the game had to offer and use that information to prepare myself to get to the end on another try, hopefully.
With this genre, motivation is maybe the thing that I find the most interesting. I was reading a interview with Toby Fox, who, as you probably know, is a big Toho fan, and he was saying that
Oh, yeah.
he was really motivated to keep playing this game that was really hard just because he wanted to hear the music, so it was like wanting to hear the next song that kept him going. Were you motivated to keep going because you wanted to beat it as a game, or did you want to keep going so you could read the next set of dialogue, or so that you could get deeper into the story?
Gosh, that's always been a difficult question for me because I've ended up associating the story and such with gameplay than maybe the average player. But I will say that ultimately, when I really want to read the story and dialogue, I'll just read the dialogue on the wiki. Some of the best parts of the story is these little omake files that Zune includes in both the demos and the full versions of the game. Between both of them, you have a lot of information about every character, and that's what Zune's going for, and that's completely unrelated to playing the game. I guess really what keeps me going is just going for the satisfying accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Roundabout way of getting to probably what's a very similar answer to any other player. But that's what I wanted to do in the end. I wanted to clear Touhou 6 on normal and then move on to the next game. Progression wise, I don't even know if that was the best idea for someone like me who's stuck only with Touhou anyway, because I think Touhou 6 is probably one of the harder ones on normal. Might not have been the best idea, but I just wanted to beat them one game at a time and see what the rest of them had to offer one game at a time.
So where did you
That
go from
said,
there? So after Touhou 6, did you just keep playing through all the rest of the games in the series?
it was a little out of order. I went
Okay.
to 7 and 8, and I think I skipped 9 because that one is not a traditional shmup. I went to 10, 11, and 12, those latter two being especially difficult. And after that, I think I started skipping around a bit. I think 16 was a new release at the time, so I wanted to get the normal 1cc of that. So that's what I did. And then I might have done 13 through 15 in order, but after that, well, I wanted to clear every game on hard next and then Lunatic, and I started skipping around at that point.
Wow. So have you done that now?
Yes, I have.
Oh my goodness. So you've done every game on Lunatic?
Only the Windows games, and I have not done Touhou 8 on Lunatic yet, though I probably could.
Wow. Initially, playing through the games on normal, how long would you say that probably took you?
It's been a long time, so it's difficult to remember.
Sure.
I think Touhou 6 must have taken me almost 6 months, I want to say, though I
Okay.
wasn't practicing that many hours a day at the time.
Okay.
7 and 8 were a lot faster, and so was 10. But I think 11 and 12 were the next ones that I really had to sink a lot of time into.
You've gotten a lot of practice through playing all of these games. Have you developed a strategy for when you approach a new Touhou game, or a new level, a new difficulty level of a Touhou game? Do you have, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do stage practice or whatever. Can you tell me about that?
I think the first thing I like to do is clear the game with continues.
Mm-hmm.
If it's easy enough, which 10, 11, and 12 have a strange continue system. But when I can, I'd like to clear the game with continues just to give myself a vague idea of the flow of the game. Nowadays, I'm not as focused on 1cc's as trying to clear the games without bombs, which I can talk about in a bit. But for a 1cc, See, in most Toho games, it's a very good idea to essentially try to stock up on many resources as you can early on and use them all later in the game. That probably goes for a lot of games, a lot of shmups, but it's especially true for Toho, which generally most games give you a lot of resources that you can use. A lot more than you probably need. If I save a fair number of them early, then I want to use them later on when it's probably harder. And other than that, if there are some particularly tricky points in the game that I think I can learn, I can go into practice, which, oh, Toho games, by the way, conveniently have a really nice universal practice tool that some people made that lets us practice any section of the stage or boss pattern that we want,
Oh,
essentially.
are you talking about
So that's nice
like
to
an
use.
external tool that you can use to set up practices?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What's that
Yes.
called?
That is called TH-Prac.
TH-Prac. Okay,
Probably not
that's
too
really
hard
good
to
to know.
find. If you have a game open and you load it up, then if you go into practice mode, just pick a difficulty and character, and you can essentially load up any pattern in the game, even if you haven't unlocked the stage practice yet. And nobody would consider that cheating. Almost nobody, anyway.
No, yeah, no,
Because,
it's practice. It's
yeah,
practice. Yeah.
practice is practice. And practice is really good just to learn how to do something or to make sure you can do something consistently. And of course, another thing you can do is look at someone else's run, because a lot of people in Toho share their runs. And if you look at someone else's run or simply ask them for advice, then they can share their own strategies with you. And if figuring out a strategy right away is not going to be as fun for you, then of course that's a valid thing to do. And it's going to help you clear a lot faster.
Yeah, for sure. There were a few sections in Toho 6, just from recent memory, that I remember I was trying to get through them and I kept on dying. And so I thought, okay, there has to be some kind of secret to this. And so I watched, a video of someone who actually knew what they were doing playing it. And I was like, I could have just stood still, or I could have just like moved over to this corner or whatever, and it would have made it so much easier.
Yeah, and once you find those nice little spots, that whole section is just going to be one less thing for you to worry about. You don't have to worry about using a bomb or taking a risk by ignoring bombs and maybe losing your life and whatever bombs you had left. It's just not a concern anymore, and you can focus on using your bombs or losing lives on the more difficult parts of the game.
I have another question, and this is a really important one that came up during my research. If Gensokyo really is sealed off by the Hourai barrier, how does everyone seem to get snacks and newspapers and suspicious amounts of alcohol? Your thoughts?
Oh, that's a very interesting question.
Yeah, this is my gotcha journalism segment.
As it happens, there are a few characters that do seem to be able to cross through the Hourai barrier fairly easily. We're not quite sure how they do it, but one character from Toho 13 famously crossed over the barrier to meet some friends in Gensokyo. And she used to live in the outside world, but she came to Gensokyo because they asked for her to come. Now that's just where she lives. But it seems that I think she and possibly a few other characters can cross through fairly freely. That being said, I don't think alcohol is too difficult to synthesize, and one character in particular that I can think of has a magic's infinite supply of alcohol anyway.
Oh, that's convenient.
So I suppose that's not too much trouble.
Well, thank you. Inquiring minds wanted to know.
Fair enough.
For people like me and maybe other know about the games, don't know about the lore people, could you give me a short summary? Like, what is the story of Touhou? What's it about?
Well, the short answer is that it's about whatever Zune wants it to be.
Okay.
And that may not be particularly helpful in the moment, but it has changed a lot over the ages. And people like to say that one of the big divides in Touhou's storytelling was between the old PC-98 games, that's 1 through 5, and the modern Windows games. But if you look closely, well, you probably don't have to look that closely. The lore and storytelling of Touhou changed a lot around the 10th entry, which kicked off a new sort of a story arc. There have been a couple new story arcs since then, including one that I believe just finished. And these story arcs that I'm referring to are essentially these connections across games that make their stories tie back to each other. Anyway, to answer that more concretely, as you kind of mentioned, most of Touhou takes place in a world called Gensokyo, which was sealed away from our world, the outside world, in order to protect the yokai and whatnot that live there. Yokai being, it's a sort of Japanese mythological creature. They vary a lot, and in Gensokyo, they survive off of human fear. As long as humans believe in them and fear
Oh.
them, they survive. And similarly, the kami in Toho also need to survive, but what they want is believers, faithful believers who will worship them. And that's essentially the difference between a yokai and a kami.
Okay, so connecting that to
And
my experience playing the games, are like the angels that you're fighting, I know I'm going to sound like someone who doesn't know what they're talking about because I don't. Like the angels that you're fighting in these games, are those yokai? Are those kami is the other ones?
if you're referring to the stage enemies with
Yeah,
wings,
that's right.
yeah, those are actually fairies.
Oh.
I don't quite remember what the deal is with fairies, although the nature
Okay.
of them is discussed a bit in 16, but
Gotcha.
they just live in they live in the world. They're mostly just there to have a good time with each other, but sometimes incidents like the ones in the games rile them up. And that's probably why we're fighting them. And there's a few manga about some of the more prominent fairy characters.
That's so funny to me that there's this, great drama about these fear-eating demons or yokai, and in the games you're fighting fairies that are like a totally separate thing, like not even the main issue.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, the random stage enemies aren't too relevant to what's going on.
Okay.
Although there's been a bit of, I guess you could call it the shmup equivalent of environmental storytelling
Hmm.
with the sort of fairy enemies that we see sometimes. Not to the same degree as some of the other shmups that make more use of the stage themselves, by the way. There's a lot going on in Gensokyo, and I think one of the most interesting things that we see is Zun taking these mythological ideas and sort of repurposing them to make sorts of social and political commentary, which is not what you'd expect from Toho just by looking at it,
No, that
but
surprises
that's
me.
what he
Yeah.
does a lot of the time.
Could you give me an example of that? Like a social issue or something that Zun talked about in one of the games?
I think the 17th entry in the series is a pretty good example of this in general. It's a story about this world called Beast Realm with a bunch of warring factions of beast spirits. And the beast spirits are all competing with each other for territory and power, essentially. And what they've done is team up with each other in these Yakuza-like groups so that the strong ones can stick together and become even stronger. And this is kind of sad because they're just spending all their time fighting each other. Not really a great use of their time, honestly, but what can they do? That's how the world they live in works,
Hmm.
and that's all they know. And that's not even the main conflict of the game, by the way, because what actually happens is that the weakest spirits in the beast realm, which are actually the human spirits, are so fed up with their situation that they end up essentially praying and reaching out into the universe, I guess, for someone to come help them. The person who comes and helps them is this god who, the way she supposedly helps them is by creating these new bodies for them essentially out of clay. Basically, these clay soldiers called Haniwa that the human spirits can possess essentially. And now this god, who's basically an incredibly intelligent computer AI even, has this powerful army of what the clay statues essentially are just robots, I guess. The human spirits are stuck in these robots doing her bidding, and now she wants to drive the beast spirits out of the beast realm. But I guess you can say it raises the question for the player. Would you rather live in this world where it's survival of the fittest, or would you rather live in a world where you're just forced to do the bidding of essentially one powerful person in particular?
Hmm.
And I'm simplifying it a lot. It's not so much of a would you rather question, honestly, because both of those are pretty bad. But that's an idea of the kind of commentary that Zuna's played with in these games.
Do you have a favorite game as far as the story or the narrative goes?
It would probably have to be just in terms of story and narrative. I guess I would say either that one, 17, that I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
or more likely 19, which so I guess I'd say that most Toho games aren't always the most interesting in terms of the literal story, as in the plot, what literally takes place during the game.
Mm-hmm.
But 19 is. It's told in a really interesting way where you're essentially playing through the playable roots of 19 different characters and
Wow.
learning little by little what's actually going on. It's
Wait,
a really interesting story.
wait, sorry. There's 19 playable characters in Touhou 19?
Yes,
Oh
I
my
guess it was
goodness.
a special game for Zune and he wanted to include 19 characters in it. This is a non-traditional shmup, though. It's a sort of a versus fighter, kind of like 9 and 3.
Earlier, you talked about how fragmented the Toho community was. Can you tell me a little bit about that? So, when you say fragmented, is there like an animosity between people who are interested in different aspects of Toho, or?
People just like Toho for very different reasons.
Okay.
And if one person passively likes Toho for the music and the remixes of the music that people will post in various places, and if another person likes Toho because they like to talk about the lore a lot, and if another person likes Toho because they like to play the games, then those three people often just don't have that much to talk to each other about. And so you'll find these three people generally in three very different communities, and they probably don't even know that each other exist.
For you, would you say you're a part of multiple communities then? 'Cause it sounds like you have dived quite deeply into the story aspect and also have a lot of experience playing the game.
Relatively so, yes. I'm not into every single aspect of Toho as much as I could be, but I'm quite interested in the story and lore and characters. And I'm also very interested in the gameplay. And I've talked to people on, I don't want to say both sides, but I've talked to people who like Toho for a lot of different reasons.
Mhm.
Now, by the way, I should clarify. I say that there's a player community that cares a lot about the gameplay, and even then, I'm specifically referring to the shmups. The fighting games are their own separate communities too. A lot of
Right.
Toho, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say me realizing like, oh yeah, wait. When we talk about Toho, like, there's a ton of games. Like, but apart from the, because that's really just what I think of as the shmups. But the more official side games, like the fighting games, and there's a huge fan game community too, right?
Oh, yeah. A lot of fans of Toho don't seem to be that interested in playing the games, but actually, a lot of people that I know from communities that aren't focused on gameplay do in fact enjoy playing the games. Not they're just not as hardcore, but you don't have to be that hardcore to finish a shmup, it seems, which is really
Yeah.
cool. I think anyway.
Yeah. No, totally.
And I like that Toho is a bit on the easy side too. It's just really cool to see people achieve new things. Even though I've gotten my normal 1cc's a long time ago, it always makes me really happy to see someone else I know get a normal 1cc. And I enjoy seeing people achieve these things, and I enjoy watching them learn.
That's great. That's so wholesome. Let's talk about Toho fan content. Can you tell me about some of the things that maybe you've seen or you've consumed? Have you played any of the fan games? Do you read any like fan made manga? Or you mentioned videos, I know, earlier.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
I do enjoy a good Toho fan game. Oh, it's worth mentioning, by the way, a lot of Toho fan games are, in fact, Toho style shmups.
Okay.
And I think those will mostly be discussed in the community of players. There are also, of course, plenty of Toho fan games that are not shmups and would appeal to a more general audience, I think.
Mhm.
There's one called Mystia's Izakaya that I really wanted to try for a while. That's just one example. Since you mentioned animations,
Yeah.
I have to shout out Minus T, I believe, who makes these spectacular 3D animations, like a 3D animated battle between Toho characters where the boss character is using three-dimensional versions of their attacks from the games.
Oh, cool.
And those have been really exciting to watch in the past.
It's awesome when people take something that they like and they use their creativity to expand that universe and share that with other people who are really into it.
Oh yeah.
Have
these
you?
are these are the kinds of people that keep the community running, you know?
Yeah. Have you ever been involved in a fan project? Either some art or some music or anything like that?
Not officially,
Okay.
but I did help a friend once by recording some little in-game footage of some attacks from Touhou 8 so that they could record the replay themselves and use that footage for a video they were making. The video itself was the song where they wanted to use some in-game footage in the background. Unfortunately, I haven't been that involved in any major or minor fan works yet, although maybe that'll change someday.
Have you ever been to an in-person Touhou event, like a convention or maybe Comiket or anything like that?
Not yet, but I will next month.
Oh, really?
I was planning to go to Toho Fest, a convention for Toho fans here in the United States. There's not too much that I can immediately say about it, but what I do know is that there was another attempt at a convention here that it happened several years back, and I guess it didn't go so well. But Toho Fest has been running since I want to say 2023, and so this would be the third one, I believe. Wanted to go there because I wanted to meet some people there, and also I think they were going to have tournaments there, and also plenty of artists are going to be there, and I just like to see the things that the artists are going to have to sell, because I don't really buy much fan merch for Toho, but it'd mean a lot more coming from an artist booth that I could see in person. Other than that, would really like to go to Daytaisai someday.
Talking a little bit more about the community, would you say that it has changed since you first got into Touhou compared to now?
Yes, I think it's changed a fair bit. And in fact, when at one point when I took a little break from Touhou to focus on some other things, I came back after a couple years. Not too long ago, in fact. I've always been in some Touhou Discord servers, but only recently have I been especially active. And I felt that the vibe has changed a lot for the better. People are a lot more positive in general, I think. I'm specifically talking about the player community, by the way. I've quite liked what I've seen, because the old player community could be a lot. I mean, no community is perfect, but we're all just in it together, being happy to get some new runs, more or less. I guess that's not 100% true, but I get the impression that most people are having a good time. And the Touhou Replay Showcase itself has really stepped up its game, I think.
That's really encouraging to hear, because I think that's something that almost kept me, I think, from first getting into shmups, was that really hard games like this, the communities can be kind of gatekeepy. This isn't that hard, this thing that you're doing, or like, you're not good enough to do this. So it's cool to hear of a more welcoming community that's, wanting new players or inexperienced players to jump in.
Gotten that experience for the most part, although I am myself a bit more experienced than I was when I was newer. I just stayed out of trouble by keeping myself humble and not getting too involved in any fights, more or less. I don't have to worry about that as much these days, though, and I don't think that's just because I've gotten better as a player. I think it's also just the environment of the community has changed for the better.
You talked about this a little bit earlier, that there was a feeling when you played the game. What do you think it is, if you had to expand on that makes people love this series so much?
That's a very difficult question to answer. Already, as I'm talking, I think people are going to listen to me and say they've had some very different experiences. I can talk about something about the games in particular. Maybe in the past it set Touhou apart from other shmups a bit more. You dodge the bullets by weaving through them. That's a little different than some shmups, which are a little more focused on weaving around the bullets, but in Touhou the bullets are relatively slow moving, so you can actually get a feel for where the relevant bullets on the screen are. He's had his bosses use these special attacks that have specific names called spell cards. I'm sure you've seen those in your own gameplay.
Yeah, okay.
And the thing about spell cards is that if you successfully whittle down the health bar without dying or bombing, or in some cases just survive until the time runs out, if there is no health bar, but if you do that, then you have captured the spell card and you get points, and for your score, I mean. And what that implies, in a lot of people's eyes, I think, is that these patterns are meant to be doable without dying or bombing. In other shmups, I do think a lot of patterns, the vast majority of patterns, are pretty fair if you want to dodge them without bombs or lives. But I think that the way they're designed makes players look at bombs more as resources that you're supposed to just use to get to the end of the game because that's what they're there for. I'm guessing that's part of the reason why players sometimes go out of the way to try to capture these spell cards, often to the detriment of their runs. But anyway, yeah, I think that has a lot to do with why survival runs, like no bomb runs or no miss no bomb runs or whatnot, are popular among Touhou players. Survival is its whole thing, and we players find them interesting to play and exciting to watch.
Is that reflected in the story too? Would you say, are these games that are about trying to avoid violence and hurting people as opposed to a game like, I don't know, Gradius, where you're blowing up aliens or something like that?
In fact, it is. And there's a whole section about this in the lore. The whole reason spell cards exist is to avoid it. Well, first of all, to avoid violence where anyone can seriously get hurt. But also, the philosophy, I suppose, was that spell cards, which are fair attacks that you give a name to, you use them until you run out. And at that point, the other person is won against you. And your spell cards have to be fair to dodge. Anyone has the chance to win against anyone. The weakest person in Gensokyo could win in a spell card duel against the strongest person in Gensokyo. And I don't think that is specifically important part of the lore nowadays, although it could always be brought back. As I said, Touhou is what Zune wants it to be. At the time, I think he wanted spell cards to be very significant, but it's a bit less prominent nowadays. But yes, that's definitely part of it, and I think that also kind of influenced me to think of Touhou as a collection of things I can dodge. I will say, you'll notice if you play Touhou, a lot of the times the way the enemies in each stage are interconnected is not the most important aspect of stage design. It usually comes down to just the kinds of patterns that enemies fire. And in like Touhou 15 in particular, there's a huge break between every section of the stage. Or it's not that long, but it feels long relatively. And you just have to dodge each pattern that the stage and their enemies throw at you one at a time. There aren't that many types of enemies. There are like small enemies that die quickly and larger ones that take a while to shoot down. And then occasionally there are some that cancel all bullets if you shoot them down, but that has not been done as much lately, I don't think. I bring that up in contrast to other shmups where you'll see that the layout of the stages is a huge aspect of how they're designed. Sometimes there will even be like these obstacles that are part of the stage and you can't even shoot them down. You just have to navigate through them.
Yeah, well,
and
especially
the
with
stage
classic
sections,
shmup.
oh yeah, the stage sections, like, they string together so much more and you better remember what's coming next. I mean, that's also true in Touhou, but it just feels like so much more deliberately part of the design in other shmups. And I think that is like another difference that's going to make people like Touhou more or less than other shmups. I really like what Touhou brings to the table for me specifically.
Yeah.
I'm interested in trying some other shmups though. I feel like a lot of the time when I read other people's takes on Touhou, sometimes I'm not fully sure how much they understand it. Gameplay aspects like that, like the stage design and how slow things can be in general, when people talk about that, I mean, that's very clearly a taste difference that they understand well enough to say Touhou is not for them, and that is completely fair.
Sure. Have you played many shooters besides Touhou?
I guess I could say I've played a fair number, but I'm not recalling any significant 1CCs for myself off the top of my head. Not to say that if you don't 1CC, you haven't really played it. I definitely don't believe that.
Right.
But for me personally, if I really wanted to 1CC, then I would have kept playing them. And it's not necessarily that I don't want to. Mushihime-sama is one that I've tried, which seems relatively popular among Touhou fans. And I didn't even quite 1CC yet, and I just don't feel comfortable giving a solid opinion on that one. Although I can say it had some stuff that I wish were in Touhou, I can say that much. But about the game as a whole, I don't know it quite as well. Ketsui is another one that I touched a little bit. I wanted to try getting a 1-all, but I haven't worked on that in a good while. And the last one I was interested in is Zero Ranger, which, interestingly enough, that one seems like another one where the developers really cared about the lore and such. Not that I know that much about it yet because I haven't finished the game, but I'd very much like to at some point.
Why do you think there's that divide between player groups for these different types of shmups?
Oh gosh. Well, I can't say I really know the answer. It could be a lot of reasons, though. The vibe of Touhou, just aesthetically, is appealing to some players and maybe off-putting to others. And perhaps the same could be said about the classic arcade shmups. The literal aircrafts that are your shots in those games took me a while to get used to personally,
Mm-hmm.
although nowadays I kind of like them a bit more. I don't think it's just that, though. I think the gameplay had a lot to do with it. Maybe people who are vaguely interested in Touhou for the gameplay don't want to engage with people talking about the characters all that much. And like really people who are just interested in Touhou for the lore might even be put off by the kinds of hardcore players that it has. It goes both ways, really.
Yeah.
And by the way, I should say, I mentioned earlier that I might think about the lore a little bit more than the average shmup player in the Touhou community, but it's not entirely true that they don't think about it at all. While I say that's not too relevant to gameplay, sometimes it actually is relevant in a certain way for just the way I engage with the games along with other players. It's not like a big deal, but it is technically there, and it's worth mentioning, I suppose.
Well, yeah,
That
I mean,
might
it adds depth,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a reason that video games aren't just, numbers that you're looking at on a screen. They have theming and they have these things that make them more than the sum of their parts.
I definitely agree that these games are a lot more than the sum of their parts, but I think another side of that is definitely that the gameplay itself, even if you take it as an abstraction away from all of the aesthetics and everything, the gameplay itself is rewarding and transformative, I think. This is something I'll say to some of the more casual fans at times when I want to talk about why I enjoy the gameplay. It's just incredibly rewarding to pull off a really good run. And that's not just because that was the game with my favorite characters or something like that. It's also because that game had specific aspects in its pattern design or whatnot that I can't quite put into words, but I definitely experienced them. And that made it all the more special to overcome those obstacles and finish my run.
For someone like me who has maybe tried Touhou and liked it and is interested in learning more or getting into it a little bit more, where should I start?
One of the first things someone can do is read a little bit more of the dialogue for the games, and that'll help you vaguely figure out what's going on. Although in some of the older games like EOSD, I do think the dialogue is not especially helpful for understanding anything, admittedly. One of the things you can do, honestly, is just read some of the lore books or the manga. Forbidden Scrollery is a great place to start. That is the name of one of the official manga. It's a long one, but probably one of the better ones. And
is it available for purchase somewhere, or is it something that's hosted on a website?
You should be able to purchase some English versions in I don't remember where I found them. It shouldn't be too hard to find because that one had some English versions.
Cool. All right. Forbidden Scrollery. Maybe any other specific topics that you wanted to go into?
There isn't too much, but I suppose I should close by saying I know that my experience is going to be pretty different from other people's. Some people might have had different experiences than me with the community, and some people might know for a fact that some of my guesses about why things are the way they are among the Touhou community and the shmup community and all that for different reasons than what I'm guessing. But I mean, hey, all I say is ultimately just how I viewed it during my experience with Touhou. I'm just one person in the end, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
I've experienced what I've experienced, and I can speak only for that.
Appreciate you sharing that from your perspective. I feel like I have a wider perspective, a wider knowledge of Touhou now.
Yeah, I'm glad you've had me on. In general, I think that as different as different shmup communities can be, especially with things like Touhou in the mix, I think what a lot of us have in common is that we just like striving for improvement and going for more fun runs and having those experiences within the games themselves. And that's something I've always felt like we can all relate to.
Do you want to shout out anything? What's the name of that Discord one more time?
It's the Touhou replay community. I like to submit runs there, and then we have a bunch of people just commentate, like 7 runs per stream, I think, usually twice a week. And I mention it not just because the stream is cool, but that's also just the main hub for the English-speaking community these days.
Okay. All right. Well, Hourai, thank you so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you too.
Take care.
You too.